I walked into her bedroom at 2 in the morning, and what I saw stopped me dead in my tracks. My hands went numb. The cash, stacks and stacks of $100 bills spread across the nightstand, the dresser, piled on the floor like she was some kind of drug dealer. $50,000, maybe more. I couldn't breathe. I'd given this woman everything, a roof, food, safety, and she'd been hiding money the whole time? My money? I stood there in the dark, my chest heaving, and I realized I didn't know her at all, not even close. Let me back up. Let me tell you how a guy like me ended up in this mess in the first place. My name's Michael Crawford. I'm 47, built my real estate portfolio from nothing, and I live in a 6-bedroom colonial in the suburbs of Connecticut. The kind of place with a 3-car garage, a pool, and a view that costs more than most people's annual salary. I worked my ass off for it. Started at 23, cold calling clients, sleeping 4 hours a night, eating gas station coffee for dinner. By 35, I had my first million. By 40, I had 5. The divorce helped me focus, honestly. No wife asking questions, no split of assets beyond what the lawyers decided. Just me, my money, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing I'd won. That was the life. Predictable, safe, boring as hell, but I'd earned the boredom. Then I met Ashley at a coffee shop in downtown Hartford. She was sitting at a corner table, laptop open, wearing this oversized sweater that made her look smaller than she probably was. I noticed her because she looked lost, not physically but emotionally, like she was searching for something on that screen and couldn't find it. I'm not the type to approach women. I'm the type to sit in my office and let my assistant handle human interaction. But something about her made me stop. "That seat taken?" I asked, pointing to the empty chair across from her. She looked up, startled. No, it's free." I sat down. We talked for 45 minutes. She was 34, worked part-time at a bookstore, and was going through what she called a rough patch. She didn't elaborate. I didn't push. Her name was Ashley Henderson. She had dark hair with a few gray strands she didn't bother hiding, and she laughed at my jokes even when they weren't funny. When I left, I gave her my card. "In case you ever need anything," I said. "Coffee, advice, whatever." She took it. "Thanks, Michael." That was 3 years ago. She called me 2 weeks later. Her apartment had flooded. Landlord wasn't helping. She was staying in a motel and couldn't afford it. I told her to pack her things. She hesitated. I remember that hesitation clearly, but she said yes. At the time, I told myself it was charity, tax-deductible humanity. A lonely millionaire helping a down-on-her-luck woman get back on her feet. That's the story I told my accountant. That's the story I told myself when I showed her to the guest house on my property. A 2-bedroom cottage with its own entrance, fully furnished, utilities included. "You can stay as long as you need," I said. "No rent, just rebuild, figure out what's next." She cried, actually cried, thanked me like I'd saved her life. And maybe I had, in some small way. Or maybe I just delayed the inevitable catastrophe. The first year was almost perfect. She got a better job at a local nonprofit, helping low-income families find housing. The irony wasn't lost on me. She brought home stories about people she'd helped, families who'd gotten their dignity back. I'd listen while we had dinner at my kitchen table. She'd come up to the main house twice a week. I'd cook or order from the restaurant downtown, and we'd eat like 2 people who actually belonged in the same room. She was grateful, always. Too grateful, maybe. She'd offer to cook, to clean, to do laundry. I told her no, that wasn't necessary. She did it anyway. By year 2, she'd moved from the guest house into one of the bedrooms upstairs. We were closer. Still not intimate, I'm not a monster, but closer. She knew my routines, I knew hers. She'd make coffee in the morning before I woke up. I'd leave the front door unlocked so she could come and go. We developed a rhythm. I told myself it was nice to have someone around, someone to talk to, someone who didn't want anything from me except maybe a sense of security. And I had plenty of security to give. My friends thought it was weird. My business partner Derek asked me straight up, "Are you sleeping with her?" I said no. He didn't believe me. My sister Jennifer called and asked the same question, just in a nicer way. "Michael, are you? Is there something romantic going on?" "No," I told her. "She's just someone I'm helping. The truth is, I think I liked the idea of helping. It made me feel like my money meant something beyond numbers in a brokerage account. It made me feel like a good person. That was my blindness. That was the crack in the foundation I didn't see. Everything changed 3 months ago. I was looking for a document in the office, a property deed I needed to sign off on, and I couldn't find it. I asked Ashley if she'd seen a manila folder on my desk. She said no, but she'd help me look. We searched together, tearing through drawers, shuffling papers. That's when I noticed it. A small key taped to the back of the desk drawer, the kind of key you'd use for a safety deposit box. I'd never seen it before. "What's this?" I asked, holding it up. Ashley went pale. Actually pale. Her face drained of color like someone had pulled a plug. I don't know," she said. "You don't know?" I repeated. "I don't. Honestly, Michael, I've never seen that before." She was lying. I could see it in her eyes, that micro-expression, the slight tightening at the corners of her mouth. I know liars. I've negotiated with them for 25 years. I didn't say anything else. I just put the key in my pocket and finished the search for the deed. Found it eventually, filed the paperwork, moved on. But that key stayed with me. It burned in my pocket like a live coal. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about it. A key she didn't know about, hidden in my desk. Why would she be in my desk? She had no reason to be there. No reason at all. At 3 in the morning, I got up and went to the guest house, the cottage where she'd first stayed. I hadn't been inside in over a year. The key fit the lock on the old filing cabinet in the corner, the one I'd left there when I moved offices, filled with documents from deals long closed. I opened it, and that's when I found the first envelope. It was thick, overstuffed with papers. Bank statements, not mine, hers. A checking account I'd never seen, a savings account with a balance that made my stomach drop. $15,000, just sitting there. Where did it come from? I kept digging. More envelopes, more accounts, a credit card statement, another bank, another account, 30,000, then 40. I was adding it up in my head, my hands shaking, my vision starting to blur at the edges. $70,000. And none of it came from her job. I sat on the floor of that empty cottage, surrounded by evidence of deception, and I realized something terrible. I didn't know who I'd been living with. I had no idea who Ashley Henderson really was. And whatever she was hiding, it was big enough that she'd been lying to my face every single day for 3 years. I stood up, pocketed the key, and walked out. I didn't confront her, not yet. I needed to know more. I needed to understand what I was dealing with before I made a move, because something in my gut told me this wasn't just about secret savings. This was about something darker, something that had been festering in my house the whole time I thought I was being charitable. That was 2 months ago. That was when I decided to really look at Ashley Henderson. And that's when everything I thought I knew came crashing down. I spent the next 6 weeks doing what I do best, investigating. I hired a private investigator, a guy named Tom Richardson, who'd helped me with background checks on tenants before. I didn't tell him much. Just, I need to know everything about Ashley Henderson. Bank records, employment history, social media, family connections, everything. Tom looked at me like I was paranoid. He probably thought I was. But he took the job. The results came back in stages, each one worse than the last. Ashley Henderson wasn't her real name. Her actual name was Margaret Ashford. She had a criminal record, nothing violent but financial crimes, fraud, check forgery, a conviction from 12 years ago that she'd apparently kept buried. She'd served 14 months. The official records were sealed, but Tom found them anyway. He was good at what he did. She'd changed her name legally in 2016, covered her tracks, built a new identity from nothing. I felt sick. Not angry yet, just sick. The kind of nausea that comes when you realize you've been living with a stranger, wearing a familiar face. But that wasn't all. Tom found something else. Bank statements going back 3 years, regular deposits, $2,000, every other week, always cash, no explanation, no source. I traced the account back. It was opened 6 months after she moved into my guest house. The deposits started exactly 1 month later. $36,000 a year for 3 years. Over $100,000. The question was, where was it coming from? I didn't confront her. Not yet. I needed more. I needed to understand the whole picture before I made a move. So I did something I'm not proud of. I checked her room when she wasn't home, searched her closet, her drawers, her laptop. The laptop was password protected. I called Tom again. He cracked it in 48 hours. That's when I found the emails. They were from someone named Richard. No last name, just Richard. And the tone. God, the tone made my stomach drop. They were intimate. Not sexually explicit, but intimate in a way that suggested they were together. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what Richard was asking her to do. How much longer? One email said. We need to accelerate the timeline. He's getting suspicious. Another. Has he mentioned the deed? We need to know if he's planning to transfer it. Another. You're doing great. Just a few more months. Then you'll have everything you deserve. I read them 3 times. Then 4. Then I had to sit down because my legs wouldn't hold me. She wasn't just hiding money. She was part of something. Part of a plan that involved me, my property, my assets. This wasn't about a woman who'd fallen on hard times and needed help. This was about a con, a long-term, carefully orchestrated con, and I'd invited her into my home. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office with the laptop open, rereading those emails, trying to figure out who Richard was. Tom had tried to trace the account. It was routed through a VPN, impossible to track. The emails were vague enough that they could be about anything, but the implication was clear. I was the target. The next morning, I did something I should have done weeks ago. I called my lawyer. Dennis Kowalski had been my attorney for 15 years. He'd handled my divorce, my business disputes, every legal matter that required actual expertise. He listened to me explain the situation without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. You need to get her out of your house, he said finally. I know, but today, Michael, not tomorrow, today. And you need documentation, everything. The bank statements, the emails, the investigator's report. You need it all in writing. What am I going to do? Take her to court? You're going to protect yourself, Dennis said. You're going to document that she's been operating fraudulently in your home. And then you're going to make sure she leaves without any legal claim to your property. Because if you're right about this, if she's part of some scheme, then the next step might be her claiming she's an extended family member, or a dependent, or something that gives her legal standing. Tenants' rights, hardship claims. You need to end this before it gets that far. He was right. I knew he was right. But I also knew something else. If I threw her out without knowing the full picture, she might run. She might take whatever this Richard wanted and disappear, and I'd never know what I'd actually been protecting myself from. So I made a decision that, in hindsight, was stupid. I decided to confront her. That night she came down to dinner. She always did on Thursdays. I'd ordered from the Italian place downtown, her favorite. Also buco. She smiled when she saw it, that grateful smile I'd seen 1,000 times, and something in me cracked. We need to talk, I said. She set her bag down. Okay, what about? Your finances. I watched the color drain from her face. It happened fast. 1 second she was smiling. The next, she looked like she was going to collapse. What do you mean? I mean the accounts, the deposits, the $120,000 you've been hiding. I mean all of it, Ashley, or Margaret, or whoever you are. She stood up, just stood there, not moving, not speaking. Her hands were shaking. How did you? It doesn't matter how. It matters that you explain it. Because right now, you look like someone who's been running a con on me for 3 years. So explain it, please. She sat back down. Her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying. She looked terrified. Actually terrified, like something inside her had broken. I can't, she whispered. You can't what? I can't tell you. You don't understand. If I tell you, it makes it real. And if it's real, then… She stopped. Her voice was shaking so badly I could barely hear her. "Then he'll know I told you." My blood went cold. "Who's Richard?" She didn't answer. She just looked at me with eyes full of something I'd never seen before. Not gratitude, not warmth. Fear. Pure animal fear. "Michael, I need you to listen to me very carefully. You need to call the police, right now, today, before anything else happens." "The police? Ashley, what?" "I'm serious. Call them. Tell them everything. The money, the emails, everything. Because if you don't, if you try to handle this yourself, you're going to get hurt. And Her voice broke. "I can't have that on my conscience. I've already done enough." She stood up and walked out of the kitchen. I heard her footsteps on the stairs, then the sound of her bedroom door closing. I sat there alone with the osso buco getting cold, my phone in my hand, trying to decide if I should believe her. Then my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer. "Mr. Crawford?" A man's voice. Not old, not young. Calm. Too calm. "This is Richard Mitchell. I think it's time we talked about what you found." My hand went numb. "How did you get this number?" "The same way I got everything else about you," he said. "The same way I've been inside your house for the last 3 years. The question now is, what are you going to do about it?" Character count, 10,087 symbols. I stood in the kitchen holding my phone, Richard's voice still in my ear, my heart hammering against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through bone. "What do you want?" I managed to say. "What I want is very simple," Richard said, his tone almost pleasant, like we were discussing the weather. "I want you to sign over the deed to your Connecticut property, the Colonial, the one worth $4.2 million. You sign it to Ashley, Margaret if you prefer accuracy, and this all goes away quietly." "You're insane." "Am I?" He laughed, a real laugh, not the fake kind. "I've been inside your house for 3 years, Michael. Your security system is child's play. I know your routines better than you do. I know you take your coffee black at 6:15 in the morning. I know you have a standing call with your business partner Derek every Tuesday at 2. I know you cry in your office sometimes when you think nobody's watching." My blood turned to ice. "How do you know that last one?" "Because Margaret told me. She sees you, Michael. She's been in your life while you've been in yours. She's watched you struggle with loneliness and tried to fill that hole. That's not cruelty, that's mercy. And all we're asking for in return is what you can easily afford to lose." "She's not a victim," I said. "She's a con artist. You both are." "We're survivors," he corrected. "There's a difference. But I get it. You're angry. You're betrayed. That's natural. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to take 24 hours to think about this. You're going to understand that the alternative to signing is much messier. Then you're going to call your lawyer and start the paperwork." "And if I don't?" "Then we burn your life down," he said simply. "Margaret has documentation, emails you sent her, manipulative things that could be interpreted as coercion or sexual harassment, depending on how a prosecutor reads them. She has recordings. She has witnesses who will testify that you've been exploiting her vulnerability. By the time we're done, your company will be under investigation, your friends will have abandoned you, and you'll be fighting criminal charges. Or you can sign a deed and walk away with 98% of your net worth still intact. Your choice." He hung up. I stood there in the kitchen with the phone in my hand, the osso buco cold on the table, and I made a decision. I called Dennis. "He wants the house," I told my lawyer, "the Colonial, $4.2 million. He says if I don't sign in 24 hours, he'll destroy me with false accusations." Dennis was quiet for a long moment. "Did you record the call?" "No, I didn't think." "Okay, here's what we do. First, you're going to file a police report. Everything. The investigation, the emails, the phone call. We document it all. Second, you're going to stay in a hotel tonight, not your house. I don't care if it's paranoid, do it anyway. Third, I'm getting a restraining order started. And fourth," he paused, "fourth, you're going to let me handle this. You don't contact Ashley. You don't contact Richard. You let the legal system do its job." What if he's serious? What if he does have recordings? Then we prove they're fabricated, which they are because you haven't done anything wrong. Michael, listen to me. I've handled people like this before. They make threats because threats are cheap. What they're terrified of is actual consequences. Police involvement, documentation, real legal liability. You give them that, they usually fold. I wanted to believe him, I really did. But something in Richard's voice had convinced me he wasn't bluffing. This wasn't some amateur scheme. This was professional. This was calculated. This was a man who'd thought through every contingency. I packed a bag and drove to the Marriott downtown. I booked a room under a different name, something I'd seen in a business magazine, some random guy named Patrick Coleman. The night clerk didn't ask questions. I paid cash. By midnight, I was in a room on the 4th floor, staring at the ceiling, trying to figure out how my life had become this. The police report took 6 hours the next day. I sat in a small room at the Hartford PD with a detective named Sarah Morales, and I told her everything. The key, the accounts, the emails, the phone call. She took notes, her face neutral, asking clarifying questions. "This Richard Mitchell," she said. "You have no idea who he is beyond the name?" "No. The investigator I hired couldn't trace him." "What about Ashley, Margaret? Do you have contact information for family members?" "No. She claimed she didn't have family. That was part of her story, that she was alone, that she needed help." Morales set down her pen. "I'm going to be honest with you. What you're describing is extortion. That's a felony. The problem is, without being able to identify or locate Richard Mitchell, prosecution is going to be difficult. We can go after Ashley, Margaret, for fraud, for the deception around her identity, potentially for conspiracy. But the real perpetrator is the one orchestrating this, and he's hidden. So what do? We set a trap," she said simply. "You call him back. You tell him you're going to sign the deed. You arrange a meeting. We wire you, we have surveillance in place, and we catch him." My stomach dropped. That's dangerous? Maybe, but less dangerous than what happens if you don't act. Because right now, he has the initiative. You give him a target, a specific time and place, and we take the initiative back. Dennis agreed. We spent the next 2 days preparing. I rented a storefront in downtown Hartford, an empty commercial space that the owner agreed to let me use. We set up cameras, microphones, everything. Detective Morales brought in a team. On Friday afternoon, I made the call. "I'll do it," I told Richard. "I'll sign the deed, but I need to meet you first, face to face. I need to know you're real and not some elaborate bluff." There was a pause. I could hear him thinking. "Monday, 2 p.m., the old warehouse on River Street. You'll come alone. You'll bring your signed deed, and you'll bring Margaret." "Why Margaret?" "Because I want her there when you transfer your property to her. It'll be poetic, the billionaire giving it all away to the woman he tried to use." "Okay," I said. "Monday, River Street." He gave me an address and hung up. Monday came. I wore a wire. I wore a panic button sewn into my jacket. I wore the confidence of a man who'd spent the weekend preparing for the worst and best outcomes. The warehouse was exactly what you'd expect. Industrial, abandoned, the kind of place where bad things happened in movies. Richard was waiting inside with 2 men I didn't recognize. No Ashley. "Where is she?" I asked. "Safe," Richard said. He was younger than I expected, maybe 40. Dark hair, expensive clothes, the kind of face that would fade in a crowd. "She's not part of this meeting. This is between us. I want to see her before I sign anything." Richard nodded to one of the men, who disappeared into the back. A moment later, he returned with Ashley. She looked terrified. Her hands were shaking. When she saw me, her eyes filled with tears. "Michael, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I tried to stop this. I told him—" "Quiet," Richard said, not unkindly. "Michael, you have the deed?" I pulled out the document. It was a fake. Dennis had prepared it, made it look official but with a signature that wouldn't hold up under any scrutiny. Richard took it, examined it, smiled. Good man, he said. You know, most people would have fought this, but you're smart. You understand that money is just money, that it's not worth your life. Actually, I said, I understand something else. I pressed the panic button. The warehouse doors burst open, police flooded in from 4 different entrances. Detective Morales was the first through the main door, weapon drawn, badge visible. "Richard Mitchell," she called out, "you're under arrest for extortion, fraud, and conspiracy." Richard's face went white. He reached for something in his jacket, but the officers were faster. They had him on the ground in seconds, hands cuffed behind his back. One of the officers grabbed the fake deed from his hands. "You set me up," Richard said, looking at me with pure rage. "You goddamn coward, you set me up." "I set you up," I confirmed, "the same way you set me up. But at least I had the advantage of knowing what I was doing." They arrested all 3 men. As they led Richard out, he was still struggling, still screaming. But I wasn't looking at him. I was looking at Ashley. She was crying now, real tears, her whole body shaking. An officer was reading her rights. "I tried to back out," she said to me. 2 months ago I told Richard I couldn't do it anymore, but he had leverage. He had things on me. He said he'd turn over my criminal record to the police, that he'd make sure I went back to prison. I was trapped, Michael. I was so trapped. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked. "Because he said if I told you, he'd hurt you. He said he'd burn your house down with you in it." I believed him. I still believe him. Detective Morales led her away. As she passed me, our eyes met for just a second. I saw something in her expression that I hadn't expected. Genuine remorse, genuine pain. But it was too late for that. Too late for redemption or forgiveness, or whatever might have been possible if she'd made a different choice earlier. The trial took 4 months. Richard pleaded not guilty, claimed he was being railroaded, claimed the whole thing was a misunderstanding. His attorneys argued that the extortion was just negotiation, that the deception about Ashley's identity was her own choice, not his conspiracy. None of it worked. The police had the wire recordings, they had the documentary evidence, they had emails and bank transfers, and a clear pattern of criminal intent. Richard Mitchell was convicted on all counts. He got 8 years. His 2 associates got 5 each. Ashley took a plea deal. Fraud, conspiracy. She got 18 months in minimum security prison, credit for time served. Before sentencing, she wrote me a letter. I didn't read it. Dennis advised against it, and he was right. There was nothing she could say that would matter. I kept the house. I kept my money. I kept my life intact, more or less. But I lost something else. I lost the ability to trust my own judgment. I lost the certainty that I could read people. I lost the faith in my own goodness. Because what kind of good man hadn't seen through 3 years of deception? That's the thing nobody tells you about being targeted by a con. It's not just that you lose money, it's that you lose yourself. You become paranoid. Every kindness feels like a trap. Every person who seems to need help looks like a predator. You become smaller. 6 months after Richard's conviction, I was in my office going through some paperwork when I found something. A photo, tucked into a filing cabinet. It was old, from before I met Ashley. It showed 2 people, a young woman with dark hair and gray eyes, and a man with his arm around her. The woman was smiling. The man was Richard. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were 5 words. "The only time I was happy." I understood then. Ashley, Margaret, wasn't the mastermind. She was the bait. She was the person they'd broken down over years, shaped into the instrument they needed. Richard's lever. Richard's tool. It didn't make what she'd done okay, but it made it human. It made it sad in a way I hadn't fully understood before. I burned the photo. I didn't need it as evidence anymore, and I thought that would be the end of it. But last month, I got a letter from the prison. Handwriting I recognized. She'd been released early on good behavior. The letter was short. "Michael, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I needed you to know. I'm sorry. Not for your sake, for mine. Because I spent 3 years in your house and you showed me what a decent life could look like. And then I threw it away. I don't expect forgiveness. I just wanted you to know that you weren't wrong about everything. Your kindness was real. I just wasn't strong enough to deserve it." I read it once. then I filed it away. The truth is, I never did become the man I was before. I learned to trust again eventually, but differently, more carefully, with walls that weren't there before. I've dated since then. I've been generous with my employees. I've even done charity work, real charity, with organizations, not with individuals. But I never again invited a stranger into my home. That bridge burned, and I was the one holding the match.